Just testing.
Scott just called me and said the mic's not working. It's not working.
I don't know that he knew how to do it.
Yeah, it's working.
Good. Largely all this. Scott. Good morning, guys.
So that's coming from the front desk.
Again? Yeah, go.
Doris, the microphone is coming from there.
No, we're good. Now, what's for you guys? Upload that.
Sorry, Gary.
Morning.
Oh, good, good. Oh, happy New Year. I'm hard to see how you do this.
Stand up
Yes.
and you say,
Roger asked me last spring, and I had to have a great excuse. I couldn't see read or do it. He was going to ask me, and I am on the now. I'm out every day
a week ago.
until
I said, oh, you want your voice back in 3 days.
where did he go to? No, I wasn't to
Could be wrong.
He went to Chicago. You probably got the close. Thank you for doing that.
Not yet.
It's fine, you're there. Morning and happy New Year. Oh, that was so good. I don't get the house, it's on the other side of the building. I had to keep it. I have to pay back the trees. When they're all done. They're all supposed to work. I don't get that house. I get the house and outside. And the house and you go walk in and they go, you know,
Yeladim, that's my Hebrew. You've heard my Hebrew for today. Let's get bageled and coffeed, and then we can proceed. Good morning, good morning. Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, it is always difficult to try to stand in the shoes of a polymath, and Roger is as close as I've ever come to one. Not to being one, but to standing next to one. I didn't get any notes from Cindy. There's a placard thanking the Stearns, I believe, for the bagels this morning. I don't know who to thank for the streaming. Is that right? Thank you. I'm going to have a little difficulty with my voice this morning, as you can probably perceive. If you can't hear and or understand me, ask the person next to you what I said. I know Rabbi doesn't generally eat bagels while standing up here. We'll see what I can do. Let's begin by saying the bracha for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu la'asok divrei Torah. Amen. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with this mitzvah, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. I tried to imagine where Rabbi was going to go this week. Of course, it's always difficult to understand where he's going to go in any week. So I decided to follow the Torah and talk about and discuss, if you will, this week's Parsha, Vayera. I don't know if any of you have read it recently. I know you've all read it in the past. So I would ask you to turn to Exodus 6:3 through 9:35. Sounds like a lot. It's a 5-minute read. And then we'll come back and begin our conversation. Vayera 6.
Could you repeat which word it is?
Vayera, it's Exodus 6:3 through 9:35. What page?
91.
I'll tell you as soon as I put my glasses on.
91.
Begins on page 93, 92, 91. Going on. And if any of you finish it within the allotted 5-minute period, I commend to you that you go back and read 5, Exodus 5, because it kind of sets the tone for where we are going to be today. You can skip 6:14 through 25. There will be a test. I would imagine that by now you're sufficiently into this that you kind of recognize the theme. Although it's not yet April, this is our introduction to Pesach. When I first began to look at this, and I read the name Vayera, I was reminded fondly of my Zayde, who was, by will of my Bubby, a very frum man. I don't know what he would have been otherwise. He's from Poland, as many of our ancestors were, and of course went through his life pronouncing W's as though they were V's. So when I read Vayera, the first thing that came to my mind was Vayera. Why? And I began to think about the Y's, W-H-Y, plural S, that all of this brought to me. Why? Why does God use 3 names? It's never explained. I have an idea, but think about it. Why me? Essentially, that's what Moses says to God. Why me? I'm no good at this. Why are you choosing me? Why? I think there's a reason. We'll talk about it. And most importantly, I think, why 10 plagues? Why did God wait and put up with what I will call the Pharaoh's nonsense? God comes to you, he says, let my people go. It's a yes or no. It's an easy thing to do, especially if you're writing, as the scribes did, this story. So let's begin, if we can, by hearing your responses to the first of my 3 questions. Why does God use 3 names? He doesn't know his own name. That's not a plausible answer. So why do you think God uses 3 names in the very first part of Vayera? He says, I am Asher, Ayeh. And then he says, I am Shaddai. And then eventually he comes to the ineffable name, Yehovah. I effed it, but that's okay. So why do we think he uses 3 names? Anybody?
One is inadequate. Because one is inadequate.
That's a good answer. One doesn't do the job. Ayeh, Asher, Ayeh. Maybe that's just not good enough. So why 2? He modifies it with Shaddai. Jimmy?
Because it implicated even more names. He's infinite.
He's infinite.
Yeah, it stopped at 3, but the projection continues, so it's infinite, and humans are incapable of really comprehending the whole thing.
My thought perhaps goes along with both of those responses. If you name something, if something is named, it takes on a finite bond, a finite bound, rather, a boundary. If it's named, it's named. But God, we are presented, is a transcendent entity. He defies definition, pardon the play on words. He defies definition. He defies being labeled. He defies having bounds and boundaries cast around him. Earlier in the story, as it's written, he gives a name. And one might ask, well, okay, why? Why'd you give a name this time when you knew it wasn't the whole name, the real name, the transcendent name? And he does it a second time. Shaddai. Reminds me of the novel Dune with the sandworm, Shai Halut, the name of the sandworm, Shaddai. And then, in a most intimate moment, Cindy, in a most intimate moment with Moses, he shares for the last time a third name, which is the name by which we have become accustomed to referring to God. Not his real name again. It is a symbol. I don't know if you all noted in the transliteration or the translations here. Ayeh Asher Ayeh is spelled out in English. Shaddai is spelled out in English. Jehovah is in Hebrew without the benefit of vowels. It is almost, we're taught, the ineffable name. Still probably not his real name, but as close as I think as humans are ever going to come. Cindy and then Gary.
Is there also, whether today or in ancient times, magic in the word, in the number 3? Was there a magic component to that particular number?
I am not a Kabbalist, but my guess is the answer would be yes,
That might be another.
because Kabbalists find magic in everything. But it's a great observation. I don't know what the magic would have been, but certainly we have magical numbers throughout our religion and our history.
That's, of course, the lines that struck me first, but I also see, I mean, this may be some imagination here, but I also see a telescoping of time in 3 names. Lord, Creator. El Shaddai was the intimate of our ancestral Abraham, Isaac, and
Jacob.
And then Adonai, or that's the infinite, the unknowable, and then the covenant. So you've got sort of the telescoping of the creation.
Wonderful.
Right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. It probably goes to you, Doris. The number 3 names of God, is there a relationship between Judaism and Christianity bringing that over? No. Okay. The 3 made me think, perhaps.
Gary? Doris answers no.
So I would ask the question, what is the difference of what his name is? Because as you mentioned, and I've always thought, it's ineffable, it's transcendent. There isn't a name that really is meaningful. It's not like a physical person attached to the Ron to a physical person. So the other point is, just like it is that from Christianity has always had the idea of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. You have a Trinity. And my view of that, I've always thought that God created 3 different forms to be used at different times. Again, his Son, who was brought here as a physical form, and then the Trinity, the Holy Ghost. Again, it's a concept. So
I think a lot of this is hard to wrap your head around. But in the end, I would get it. That's the question, what is it in me?
I understand that and thought about it a little bit, not a lot, a little bit. But I came up with a different answer. He could have said, if he was trying to avoid being put in a box, what he had said before and what we recite at every service. Ani Adonai Adonai, I am what I am. Could have said that,
Which happens.
but he didn't. He gave a name. I think the author was trying to, as opposed to creating a mystery, we're the ones creating the mystery. I think the author was saying, look, this is a very important part of the story. With a new actor, Mo.
Go ahead and finish.
I'm finished.
Okay, I think that we as readers and the authors and writers gave God different names. I think it's a people decision, not God's decision. I don't think God really would utter his name to anybody. I think that we as humans need to name things so that maybe different authors at different times gave different names. We're always afraid to utter the real name of God because of consequences. So maybe they kept changing it for protection.
Yeah, I mean, why not? We're the ones that gave the names. It's a pretty old book. The author gave God a name many years ago. That name stuck. It's the one we use today. Adonai, Yehovah. So, is it the real name? Is it just the one that we've gotten lazy about for 10,000 years? However many thousand years it is. And maybe that's the answer, I don't know. But it's a moment I see of perceived intimacy with Moses, of God, of the author telling us that God is giving something to Moses that he did not give to his ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's giving him a new name, a real name. One may argue a powerful name, because he wants Moses to do something very powerful. Which brings us to the second of my whys. Why me? Why Moses? I don't have a good answer for that one.
Rana, just touching one more moment on the three names.
Sure.
As a, if you will, plot device, as you say, God is asking Moses and Aaron to do something very difficult. And so these words and these couple of sentences give us the sense that God is trying, to impress Moses and Aaron. I'm powerful here. I'm behind you. I'm with you, and you're charged with a powerful force behind you, and you shouldn't shirk from that.
Very well spoken. It was what I was attempting to say. Very well spoken. God wants Moses, and through Moses, he says a very interesting thing. At 7:1, he says, The Lord replies to Moses after Moses says, why me? I'm not good at this. I'm slow of speech. Maybe forgot that God made him pick up the hot coal. Who knows? I place you, Moses, in the role of God to Pharaoh and your brother Aaron as your prophet. Exactly what you've said, and exactly, I think, what I was getting at. He's really singling Moses out to be an extraordinary, powerful person. Why me? Why does the author feel that it's necessary to have an argument about it? Moses and God, I don't want to do this. This is not for me. And God says, Shah, I am making you, for the purposes of the rest of this story, the rest of history, a God in my place. You'll act that way. You won't be, but you'll act that way. Now, at Pesach, at Passover, we have 4 cups of wine. Why? Because as Vayera begins, God says to Moses, and by the way, Vayera, I appeared. He does not appear to Moses. God is merely saying, I appeared to your ancestors, and here I am again. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I came as my 3 names. But I came for a reason, and I'm coming to you for a reason. And it is to fulfill my covenant with your ancestors. 4 cups of wine. 4 duties that God has not yet at this point fulfilled relative to his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm going to deliver your people from enslavement. I'm going to free them. I'm going to redeem them. Troubling word. I'm going to redeem them. I am going to take them to me as my people, the chosen ones. And I am going to bring them to the promised land. The 4 parts of God's covenant that until this point he has not fulfilled. And he says to Moses, this is why I'm here. The beginning of Vayera. This is why I am coming to you. And then he goes on to explain, I'm going to let you do this. And Moses says, why me? Now we know from the story, and it's very familiar to us, that Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh. And they speak those famous words, let my people go. And we all know the story. I mean, I'm not going to have to tell you the basis of the story or review with you the basis of the story. But I do have some observations, and I'd like to hear your response to them. I said that there were 3 Vais that came to my mind. Vai 3 names. Vai me, and Vai 10 plagues. Certainly God was powerful enough when Pharaoh said, no, to do something about it. Why does he choose this drawn out, tortuous route? Remember, he said to Moses, you're going to be my God, or you're going to be a God. Aaron's going to be your prophet. And although it came as a surprise to me, I don't know, a shock, but a surprise to me, that it wasn't Moses who did all the magic. It was Aaron. God told Moses what to tell Aaron to do. Aaron did it. Moses said to Aaron, "Here, take my rod and throw it on the ground." And it became a snake. And Pharaoh's magicians threw their rods on the ground and they became snakes. And God's snake ate them all. My magic is as good as yours, says the Pharaoh. Not quite realizing that his magic was gone and God's magic was fat. They go back, second time. Let my people go. No. All right, I'm turning all the water into blood. Aaron, take the stick, touch it on the water. Aaron does. Everything turns to blood for 7 days, but at the end of 7 days, either God or Pharaoh's magicians changed it back. It's unclear as to which it was. They go back again the third time. Let my people go. No, frogs you shall have. Aaron, take the stick. Remember, it's Moses telling Aaron to take the rod. Touch it on the water and have the water filled, all of the water filled with frogs, overbounding the shores into every pond and cistern and pool, frogs. Or as we like to say, grenouilles, which are wonderful. You just fry them with a lot of garlic. But again, no, and again, God says to Moses, tell Aaron to touch the ground. The ground becomes covered with lice. All the dust becomes lice. And again, Pharaoh says to his magicians, go take care of that. And the magicians say, no. Don't you recognize this point that there is a far superior God to our gods that is doing this? Do what they say. Pharaoh says, no. The next actor is God himself. Maybe this is the final act. God kills all the livestock. He brings a severe pestilence. Pharaoh says no again. Again, God acts directly. God causes swarms of insects to infest all of Pharaoh's Egypt. No. God says to Moses, have your people take soot from the ovens and go and throw the soot in the air. And as the soot comes down, that which it touches shall turn to boils and fester. But in verse 9:12, we're told, but God the Lord stiffened the heart of Pharaoh. Now remember, in each of these episodes, the author writes, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, Pharaoh's heart was stiffened, Pharaoh's heart was obdurate. Good word, was obdurate. But here in verse 9:12, the Lord stiffened the heart of Pharaoh. But still, Pharaoh says no. Maybe that's a fourth why. Why does Pharaoh say no at that point? Let's come back to that. Now Moses causes the heavy hail with fire in the middle to come down, kill all the beasts standing in the field that are left from the pestilence, and knocks down all of the crops, with the exception of the crops that had not yet begun to flourish. Leaves something. Why did he leave them? Because God brings locusts. You want to know, locusts have something to eat. My grandmother, S. Skinter, S. locusts. And God again says no. Now, we don't in our reading from today, going through 9:35, visit yet the 10th trial, the 10th plague, if you will. It's not really a plague. We don't know what that is until 2 chapters down, 11:4. But I want to go back to the 9:12. The Lord stiffened the heart of Pharaoh. And the question that I had to begin this part of my conversation, why did it take so long? Did God always have in his heart and in his mind the determination that he was going to slay the firstborn man and beast as retribution for Pharaoh's enslavement of the Hebrews, of the Jews, and refusal to let the Jews go? Why was Pharaoh not turned from his course until the 10th plague? The Lord foretold to Moses.
In 7:3 is the first time God says, I will harden his heart. And why? Because he's got to give time to bring out severe chastisements so the Egyptians will know that he's stopped going. I mean, very early before all of that, God states, I'm going to set this up, and he's going to keep saying no so I can show him. And then he speaks to do that.
So you're agreeing with my theory. God always intended to carry this thing out. At no time was he going to allow Pharaoh to say, okay, because it's not my plan. My plan is to wreak havoc, to destroy Egypt and the empire, or Egypt and the Pharaoh. To kill all the firstborn. If you kill all the firstborn, you kill all the nextborn. So there'll be no more. Maybe what Israel is accused of doing today. I have mixed emotions. But nonetheless, that was God's plan.
Why did he need to prove that he was so good? I mean, this sounds like some of the things that we know people do. And we expect more from transcendent, all-powerful.
Well, could it be that this was written by people?
We think.
Cindy?
I think there are two of many answers to the question. One, the plagues become increasingly more horrific. So to show you that God is a merciful God, if only one of the plagues would do it, it would spare what came next. Okay, so he doesn't have to, pull all the stops out at once. And that shows a merciful God. There's also the, I don't know if you call it cynical, but the narrative is a lot more interesting. And immediately we kill all the firstborn, that's it. It's over. You build the suspense, you build everything into it. So those are two of probably 100,000 answers.
Let me ask you this. In your scenario, both of them, are you positing that God always intended to go to step 10? Or are you positing that he was making it up as he went along? Gary says the first.
I would like to think was a merciful God. He didn't want to kill the firstborn.
It's a better story.
So,
That's the second thing.
so I think what I hear you saying is, I believe in God, there's a good God, but he has a mean streak.
No. His limits are tested.
Sir, we have some guests.
Chapter 3, you had already stated that the Egyptians were not letting, Israel go, and that he was going to smite them. Horribly. And I can't remember where it says that he would actually kill the firstborn because the Egyptians had tortured his firstborn. So my belief has always been that he needed to bring Egypt to its knees and destroy it completely, economically, psychologically, physiologically, so that there will be no Egypt to go back to for the Israelites.
Very good point. Very good point, and it seems as though he always intended this. And yet, and we're not there yet, that I'm not going to go beyond Vayera, this set of writings. We know that in short order, the Egyptians are back in their chariots, chasing us across the Red Sea. So, although I see and tend to agree with what you're saying, I'm forced into a situation where the author is told by the publisher, look, I need another book. Where's the next chapter? It can't end here.
Okay, so you brought up when they went through the Red Sea and the water came back.
We're not there yet, but go ahead.
Okay, but it gets back to what you said, the intent, because after that Red Sea incident, and the Israelites are going to rejoice. I forget where it says here. There's nothing to rejoice here. Something to the. It's a little further on, but God tells the people, don't rejoice. There's nothing great about all these people dying. So I don't think he intended, in the framework of the story, which it is, I don't think he intended to kill the firstborn. I think he hardened Pharaoh's heart before that to let him, in his stubbornness, to let him think, if this gets any worse, it's on me, not anybody else. He gave Pharaoh the opportunity to face what was really going on, and Pharaoh ignored him.
He ignored him several times. But why did he harden Pharaoh's heart if not to guarantee the outcome that he wanted? That's my question. Gary.
This whole narrative has always posed the idea in my mind that, and I'm going to ask a question that has no answer.
I have an answer.
I'll ask the question, do you think this is an argument against the concept of free will? Because if there were free will, then this narrative may have to also be true. We don't know that Pharaoh would have responded the way he did if there were free will. God hardened his heart each time, and the response was increasingly worse. I would posit the idea that perhaps this is an argument against the idea of free will.
I think that argument could be made, but I think textually and perhaps contextually, we see that Pharaoh is predisposed to saying no. And textually, God eventually comes in and says, wait, I want you to keep saying no. So I don't know that that is an argument against free will. Pharaoh had the ability from the nuns, from the very beginning, to say, I will let the people go. Sir?
And in fact, he actually says, I will let you go when he is, with the plagues and he wants to get rid of them, he says, okay, I'll let you go, but who's going to go? So he did have a choice. And in fact, God, the text only says, I think 2 or 3 times that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Whereas the other 7, Pharaoh hardened his heart on his own.
I think that's exactly textually correct. Yes. And each time the Pharaoh seems to be bending a little bit, Moses says, ooh, wait a minute, let's put some conditions on this. God tells Moses to say, let's put some conditions on this. No, we can't make sacrifice and celebrate the Lord here. We have to go 3, whatever the measurement was, 3 meters, 3 whatevers, out of the city, out of here. What's here? Here could have been the entire Egyptian empire, which was kind of big at that time. And then, okay, you can go, but you got to take our cows. And Moses says, no. We got to take our cows and our goats and our sheep, because we have to examine them and select from them the ones that are suitable for sacrifice. So Moses is putting conditions on this. God is telling Moses to put conditions. Don't let him bend too far. Don't let him say, okay, take your people and your sheep and your goats and your lambs and your possessions and go really far away. In other words, escape my slavery.
Looking at the possible motives of the actors here, people of Israel have been in Egypt for 400 years. They've been subject to enslavement for some significant part of that time. And where's God been? And as the point you made, there are 4 unfulfilled covenants. So this whole act of this longer play is in part a demonstration to the people of Israel. There is a powerful God here. Whatever has been going on for the last 400 years, God's here now and in demonstrating in multiple and manifold ways that you, the people of Israel, should believe in me. I am an all-powerful God.
You remember Moses at the very beginning goes to the people, and the people say, what are you kidding? What is the name of this person that you represent? And Moses says, I think at that point, we're not to Jehovah yet, but perhaps we are, I don't remember. I'm old. And they don't buy it. And he goes back to God. He says, look, they don't buy it. And that's when God goes through the 3 names. So I think you're very right on the mark. I think the author here is bringing back to the slaves in Egypt the covenant that they've seen no evidence of for 400 or more years. After all, they never made it to the promised land. They don't buy it at first. So God says to Moses, you're going to show them, you're going to show the Israelites as well as the Egyptians that I am the Lord. I am the powerful God. I imagine at that point, generations of the Israelites had not known a God other than the Egyptian gods. And now all of a sudden we're going to introduce a new faith to them. Jimmy?
Well, to Malcolm's point, we don't know they were slaves for 400 years. Let's why they were there in the first place. There was a famine in Canaan where they were. They came to Egypt to avoid it. Egypt showed nothing but hospitality. They chose to stay there a little longer than they should have. So this isn't all one-sided, I don't think. Don't get me wrong, I have my own agenda. And the Israelites, okay, they're right no matter what, okay? But they're not. They were guests in this country that had the highest standard of civilization in the world at that point. So they weren't in a big hurry to leave until the new administration came in. The new administration saw they were getting outnumbered, and these people weren't leaving, and they got scared. We're going to get overthrown here. So there's more going on here than just, okay, they're slaves and they're being mistreated, which is all wrong. But there's a lot of political and economic implications here. And that's part of the reason Pharaoh got adjusted to this free labor. He wasn't in a hurry to let go of it. And in saying that, the Israelites were somewhat comfortable there. They weren't in a big hurry to leave. It wasn't that they were sitting on the edge of their seat, let's go. They weren't waiting for a Moses. Moses had to not only convince Pharaoh, he had to convince all these quote-unquote Israelites who weren't particularly religious. We don't have any evidence, but I think they were very interspersed in the Egyptian communities and so forth. It was their home, and as you know, people aren't in a hurry to leave their home no matter what. Just go back to Germany. They saw what was going on. Oh, this will pass. We're not leaving. Okay.
To your point, and going back in the story from where we are, did God suddenly wake up one morning and say, you know, I'm going to disrupt Egyptian life, the life of the Israelites? It's been quiet for too long. Let's have some fun. Or was there something else that was the precursor to this movement, to this story? I don't have an answer for that. Have we read yet, and will we read as we go forward? A why, another why.
Well, I think the answer is slavery. The people were crying out, because of the burden of the state. I think that may have awakened God and remembered his covenant.
Slavery and Pharaoh had said that new boy babies were going to be killed. So add killing my child to the fact that I'm out there every day making bricks and carrying heavy loads. I think that's enough to start me thinking about the brain here.
Of course, Pharaoh's decree to kill the firstborn came 83 years earlier. Moses was 83 when he did all, I think 83.
Aaron was 83 and Moses was 80. And what I find fascinating, since you brought it up, is if Aaron was only 3 years older than Moses when he was born, why wasn't he one of the boys who was going to be taken away? Because they talked about young boys, not just babies. And Aaron was there. So how come his mother is only dealing with this baby as opposed to both of her boys? I find that very
There are some gaps in the story. There are some gaps in the story. But, and we can't believe, Jimmy, you know, the accounting of years and days is meaningless. We don't know what that means. But, as I said before, to your point, it doesn't make a whole lot of textual sense that God was so compelled by the state of the Israelites that he wanted to begin this whole thing. I had mentioned, if you have time, go back and read the portions of last week's Parsha. And chapter 5, the Lord says, first time to Moses to go and set my people free, for they are subjugated, for they are, I can't find the exact, Exodus 3:7, and the Lord continued, I have marked well the plight of my people in Egypt, and have heeded their outcry because of their taskmasters. Yes, I am mindful of their sufferings. This was part of the argument between God and Moses. So, yes, apparently there was some kind of an outcry going on. Yes, apparently God has marked it well. He says so. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and say, our Lord the God says, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, nonsense. And not only that, he tells his taskmasters, don't give them any more straw. Don't relieve them of their responsibility to make bricks. But don't give them any more straw. Let them go get their own ingredients to put into the Egyptian mud. And that's when textually we see the burden becoming less and less palatable, bearable. So, again, there are a lot of unanswered questions in this parsha, in this section of the Torah. And I think it shows us, to some extent, that we can't take any of this out of context. And we can't take any of it out of where it belongs in the textual story. Yankee Tauber, who is a Talmudist, a Chassid, wrote this. Pundits love generalizations. Half the world is this, the other half is that, and that explains about everything. Here, talking about the era, then is our own generalization. The world consists of pagans and transcendentalists. Pagans eat, drink, and sleep. Transcendentalists work for world peace. Pagans believe that the way things are is the way things should be. Transcendentalists believe that we are placed on this earth to change the way things are. Pagans worship nature. Transcendentalists worship God. The Egyptians, Yankee posits, were pagans. The Hebrews, transcendentalists. The Hebrews were slaves to the Egyptians, and God intervened, humiliated the Egyptians, freed the Hebrews, and let them loose upon the world. This, he says in 30 words or less, is the story of the birth of the Jewish people. Thus, when we read of the 10 plagues visited upon the Egyptians, these are usually understood as punishments for their cruel treatment of the Jews. But a closer reading of the Torah and the Torah's account reveals that they also served a more basic function, the 10 plagues, to discredit the gods of Egypt, so that you shall know, the Israelites, that I am God. That's a modern Talmudist. He's parsing the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but the modern Talmudist comes to that conclusion. I think that if you consider his pagan versus transcendentalist classifications, when he says, thus in 30 words or less is the story of the birth of the Jewish people, the release of the transcendentalists, the disbursement of the transcendentalists, who, remember, believe that things should be changed to be better, as opposed to things should be the way things are because they are. I think that's something interesting to think about. Does anybody else have a view on that? So we're all Hasidics, Malcolm.
Ron, just, and that perspective or that thought kind of casts the whole purpose of the Passover holiday in a different light. It causes you to think about that story different, the story of the Passover different.
And in fact, we know that in the next two parshas, God gives us the rules of Passover. He says, here's what you're going to do. You're going to celebrate this, and you're going to do what you got to do. Exodus 10, 11. $13:43, the Lord said to Moses, this is the law of the Passover offering. No foreigner may eat of it, but any slave a man has brought may eat of it once he has been circumcised. In other words, once he has become a Jew. Once he has entered the covenant, I should say. No bond or hired labor shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in your house. You shall not take flesh from outside of the house, nor shall you break a bone of it. The whole community of Israel shall offer it. To go back to the 400 years, it does say right here that, by the way, and I've always dismissed this because I don't think it means anything, but the length of time the Israelites lived in Egypt was 430 years. We forgot the 30 years. And at the end of the 30th year, to the very day, all the ranks of the Lord departed from the land of Egypt. So, yes, sir.
Oh, let me interrupt your statement there, but I wanted to go back to your passage of the transcendent people.
Yes.
Because I think there is, something more in there than, or maybe you have to read that passage again, but the idea of casting us out as transcendent people around the world. There is no mention of the promised land as ours. It sounds to me like a more universal condition of either exile or unity as people. I don't know that I'm misinterpreting that.
I don't think you're misinterpreting it. I don't think what I read necessarily addresses that. But we have to remember that the originator of the thought was the Lubavitcher Rav sometime in the 1700s.
In exile.
So historically, the diaspora had already occurred.
I didn't get the name of the modern Talmudist person you were quoting, the modern.
Yankee Tauber, Tauber.
Okay, he's given the pagans a really short shrift. If we go back to the pagans we know of, the Greeks, anybody who didn't believe in a monotheistic society, they made lots of progress. They thought the world should be changed constantly. We read the Greek philosophers over and over because they thought they should be changed. So I didn't like the division between pagan and transcendentalists. Pagans all bad. Transcendentalists want to change things.
I agree that literally that's what he does. Literally. I don't know, and I don't know him, but I don't know that he didn't create that generalization to further his point of generalizations. I don't know one way or the other, but I agree with you. You can't dismiss all of human history up to 430 years after the enslavement. But that is what it is. I happen to personally like, the thought that, and if we look at modern history, the Jews, at least in my generation, and I think the generation before me, which goes back a long way, we've always been mostly at the forefront of social progress, as opposed to either at the tail end of social progress or socially regressive. So I personally like this sentiment. But that's my own personal view. And I don't know that it's a correct one or not. Anybody? Gary? Oh, I'm sorry. Sandy?
Would you characterize that thought to be true of more conservative aspects of Judaism, more conservative movements?
I think on the go along, come along basis, yeah. But certainly not as leaders.
I mean, that might be very true of Reform Judaism, but it might be very true of Reform Judaism.
Yes.
But I don't think Orthodox or
I
other, or other groups would fit into that.
I absolutely agree, and I'll repeat what I said. I think the conservative and ultra-conservative movements in Judaism, they've never taken the role of being repressors. They've always kind of gone along and come along and let the reformed, the leftists, as is true, I think, in any culture, the liberalists move forward with Reformation. I don't think conservatives move forward with Reformation.
Well, that's why you can't say those kinds of things about Jewish people, and because they don't fit all Jewish people.
I agree. I'd like to think that they do. I know they don't, but wishful thinking, it's my personal bias, is wishful thinking. So, Gary?
I'm not sure I agree with this line of thinking here. I don't know first of all, I don't know how you define social progress. What is the definition of social progress? We're going to get a little off the beat here, but you brought it up.
Take your shot, boy.
Well, I don't want to take too much of a shot here because this is a group and I don't want to go necessarily go in that direction. But I would just take, some unprecedented approach. The Jewish people as a people have made huge, I think, progress scientifically, particularly because I'm a scientist, scientifically. We hold more Nobel Prizes as a group proportion. From a social standpoint, I'm not so sure about that. The founders, none of the founders were Jewish that I know of, except possibly Hamilton, and that we don't even know for sure about that. So, I mean, I think.
Gary, who say it again? None of the founders were Jewish except possibly.
Well, we don't know. Hamilton may have had some background. It's controversial, so I won't get into that either. Oh, pardon? Yeah, Hamilton, yes. So, I'm not really sure that I buy this. We could get into the weeds here. There's a civil war. There were Jews that were at the upper end of the Civil War, and they ended up in the South, most of it. The vice president of the Confederacy was
Jewish.
Right. So I don't want to get into too much of the weeds here, except to say I take some question about that.
And I accept your curiosity.
Let's get back to Torah study here.
Well, I just want to add something, being a foreigner, maybe your scope is being directed only to the U.S., but if you see all the social progress that Jewish people have done, say in places in Latin America, where I come from, there is a big difference where the capital is concentrated among Jewish families rather than Arab families.
So I agree.
So there is social progress from transcendentalists. And again, I don't know what the author, the Talmudist, means by transcendentalist or pagan, because I believe there are, and this is going to sound harsh, there are both kinds in both groups. You know what I'm saying? You can pull out people from the pagans that will be transcendentalists. And in fact, there are evidence that in the Mayan culture, there were people who were monotheists and they paid it with their lives.
Absolutely, I think Muslim, that's absolutely true. Pagans, we think of pagans as people who worship different gods. In the time of Abraham, they were wooden figures. So, Abraham himself was a pagan before God discovered him. So I absolutely agree.
But if you listen to what Tauber writes, if you accept his definition before he makes his statement, he defines pagan and he defines transcendentalists for the purpose of his comments. Pagans eat, drink, and sleep. Transcendentalists work for peace. If you accept his definition, then his statement makes all the sense in the world. No.
Ron, I want to take that thread and the point that I think I heard Jim make. In the context of that dichotomy or division, I think you could describe the Jews, for much of the time they were in Egypt, as pagan. They were not transcendentalists. Through their whole journey of time, through, whether they were well off or whether society.
I agree. And let me point out that when Gary was born, he wasn't a very famous, very competent doctor. What Tauber says, this was the birth of the Jewish people. They weren't necessarily a fait accompli. They were not necessarily phenomenal rheumatologists. Not at birth. So I think, take Tauber for what it says, what it is. And remember again that he is commenting on the Lubavitcher Rav's writings. And you have to put it all into context. The Lubavitcher Rav had the constitution that he had. Ani Adonai Adonai. He was God, they say. Jimmy?
Brian, there's one interesting.
Then Doris.
There's one interesting note here that when you originally told us to read,
Yeah.
and I read it about 10 times during the session, it's 6:2, line 20. And it's about Moses' parents. I find it kind of interesting. Abram took to wife his father's sister Yocheved, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. So, in other words, Abram, who's Moses' father, married his aunt, his blood aunt. And you go further, there's a list of rules here, and that's one of them. That's a real no-no. Okay, so.
Remember, we hadn't taken the vacation to Sinai yet.
I understand it, but it's another implication that though Moses is so elevated, he and his whole lineage are a long way from perfect.
Absolutely.
And there's just something fascinating about his ancestry. It's a one-sided ancestry.
Well, did his uncle die, and therefore the father was following the rules of that
Doesn't matter.
life?
His parents are blood related. They're not in-laws. You're talking about levirate marriage.
Right.
That's an in-law situation. This is an actual blood relative. That's a different thing. No, I just found his lineage rather interesting.
And I think you'll find that,
Well, yeah.
if you remember when we looked at Ruth a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
there's also what we would say is prescribed intermarriage there.
Right.
So, was that the social norm of the time? I think it may well have been.
Those were non-blood relatives.
Well, apparently not so. Or at least in this author's experience, blood relatives were okay.
So,
I don't know how many Mongoloids came out of that, but. Oy, is that a word from a long time ago? Woo. Doris, you had a comment.
Yeah. I liked the way you began with the names of God. I think what would be helpful, if you agree, is to look at chapter 3. It's on page 88 of these books. And starting with verse 13. Because there we get God telling Moses what his real name is. So Moses said to God, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who am. The footnote will tell you that. A very philosophical term. And for that term, I am who am, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what Thomas Aquinas says. And Thomas Aquinas is dependent on Aristotle and on Maimonides. Thomas says, this is saying there is one entity whose essence and existence are identical. My essence and yours is human being. We are human beings. That's our essence. Our existence, mine and yours, and the existence also of inanimate things, is contingent. I can skid on the road today going home and die. That's the end. My existence is gone. Forget about afterlife and all of that.
God forbid.
I'm gone. Yours is contingent as well. But there is one entity, I am who am, not in our genus of being. God is not a being the way we talk about God in the Bible. Philosophically, Thomas is a philosopher, says in philosophy, we don't want to talk about God as a supreme being or a divine being because that puts him in our genus of being. God is not in our genus of being because God is being itself. God is being itself. God is the to be. That makes God creator. No beginning, no end. It's an entirely different order of being. And God says that to Moses. Well, if you really want to know who I am who am. I'm being itself. I'm the reason you're here. I'm the reason you're not here. I am the creator of everything.
And we declare that.
And,
Oh, I'm sorry.
God says, here, I want you to get to know me. And the only way you're going to get to know me is analogically.
Is what?
Through story. But the way I reveal myself to you, you cannot get to know me on your own. I will reveal. Be open to it. In any case, when you started with names, last week's Parsha, it's on the one name. But look what God does. After God says this, and this is a very respectful translation. That's why it's in, I guess, Hebrew, right? In my Bible, in the Christian Bible, it says I am who am. Doesn't have that same respect for this. So right after that, he says, they're not going to get this. That's what God is saying. They're not going to understand that. So go to the Israelites and say, I am who am sent you. They're not going to get it. So say also to them that I'm the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. But this shall be my name forever. I am who am.
forget, we declare this concept every service
Shema.
in the Shema.
I was waiting for someone to tell me that.
The Lord is
One.
And do we read that and do we flip to your point, Doris, that we are one? We don't think of the prayer that way because we attribute oneness to God. We tend not to do that as we are one. But that prayer is a universal declaration.
Fortunately, we have a philosopher, Rabbi here.
Not here.
Who is God?
It is approaching the allotted time. Is there anyone that hasn't expressed a view contrary to mine? Okay. I want to thank Rabbi for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank you for your patience, your tolerance. Please. This to me is a privilege and an honor. Thank you all very, very much for sticking for the whole hour and a half. Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom.
You must be perfect at the Seder table.
I don't know about perfect.
To lead with that drama, that's great. That was great. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, but that was because I think they realized way back when, that the offering.
And I've always blessed from the Father. And I understand now.
No question, if this is so.
Nor can I understand
Maybe that's why it's.
Because God wants the baby.
Actually, this is the first time we're ever in this kind of weather, and I'm like, looking at the snow.
It's a story.
Oh, we say God is one. That's number one. Minus that. Unity of God. Wait, no,
She said, they ruined the whole thing.
So we come up with
nice for them because, and when the 7 years of famine are it's like the guy who
Mutual understanding, and giving up.
it wasn't quite as broad-minded.
Then again,
I guess unfortunately.
yes, and, yeah, yes. Well, this is great. The last with a degree, we do. Because she thinks that he's. He's doing a whole lot.
Very, very different.
Of course. Thank you. Right. Live here, and I got that one. Was it in Texas? Okay. I'll go back. All right. And I know. And a lot of grandchildren. Yeah, I know. Oh, that's great. Thanksgiving. No, I know she didn't because I started almost. But she was with somebody, so. And I'm going to be happy with my. I know. Even 3. Right. Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
My name is Deja. Welcome. So
No, mi nombre es Eric. Mi nombre es.
Yeah, and it's uphill.
Just like the awards.
My name is
How wonderful.
There's a piano on
You wanted to go.
It's
Oh, it is. It's very good.
Especially when you look outside.
Yeah, we come from the tropic, nice beaches, warm weather.
Yeah, mine's
Rough right now in my country. Unfortunately, the extreme Chavez is now in power.
Well, there were a lot of wildfires, weren't there? In Hawaii and Maui.
We received some words and stuff like that, so just thrown at our house. So we're like,
My grandmother
we
told
had
me
already, I was in the last year, so we were thinking about it, and that was like,
she had traveled all over.
yeah, over the lot.
Yeah, I've never been.
There is a big,
I
there's a
can
community,
tell my
and there's a lot of people coming in because
Yeah.
of a special law given
Yeah.
by Biden's administration, where
I've never
a
been.
resident, not even a citizen,
So-
but honestly, we're just the way we're like a visa, we don't want to go through. It's just, things are rough economically, politically,
yeah.
and now even religiously.
Did you room with one of your grandchildren?
We
Oh,
usually-
that was so nice.
I've worked as a call center guy for the last 5-6 years, but I've also been a
Yeah.
teacher, but I don't have, that's the thing, I'm just gonna work on the degree, and I know this
Yeah, me
is-
too.
So, yeah. When I have a social security number, because I did study years on this. Yeah, that's a good start. And she's married to a citizen. And so she's already starting, she's already in her process.
his name.
Yes.
That's just my,
Oh, yeah, she's awesome. Have you ever heard of keto? Okay, so keto is a diet where you literally, she's awesome. She started doing it because of that. So be able to please daddy. Yeah, she had her own business and things were just, sales were going booming even during the pandemic, and then we dropped.
It's like when the Romans took over Jerusalem.
What a nice way to celebrate Armenian My sister celebrated Armenian birthday.
There are ways
So we were invited to New Year's Eve, but she came over and slept over. Because we won't let her drive home by herself.
job hunting and
And
I know the laws. I know
I mean, we've done
I know
this
we're
for
bringing
years.
but I know it's watch. It's not. Out of survival.
Nobody knows what happened.
It was fun.
That way.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay. It's today. It's today. So we're all gonna go out for dinner. The guys they wanna watch the Browns and stuff, so we're gonna take out. Right, no, so that'll be nice, and I said, as long as somebody gives me a couple, I'll be happy. Because it's my favorite chocolate, so somebody's got them. Yeah, it's gonna get whatever she needs, so. I gotta go. So, yeah, I'll see you. Okay, tonight. So I'm busy today.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I can go to the library, but I don't think I'm gonna make it.
Are you going to the Martin
Okay, so here's what I heard.
More or less permanent
I was
fix
against
for this that involves
Carol,
really
she said they
doing
needed
construction.
that,
Is it major surgery? No. Is it my surgery? It's hard.
That's at 12:30.
it's,
Very
and
major.
so I
It's beyond
volunteered
major.
to be on
In order to see whether or not
for the program.
it would be worthwhile to do this major surgery. She injected both
Maybe I'll come to one.
cords.
Yeah, the speech.
Yeah, I offered to volunteer there too when I got Carol's message. But
Yeah.
Yes.
she said she already had
Good
that.
enough.
It resorbs.
I wrote a
I believe God is in control of everything, and
But if this works,
if it's happening, it's God's will. So
vegetation,
we are walking in His will.
failure of the voice to maintain. Jennifer, thank you. Is cured by this. Even though this growth is off, how soon? It does.
Maybe I'll come at 12:30.
It'll at least give us some information about what it's
I'm trying to stay a little bit away from my
Oh,
bar, which
yeah.
is
I know.
but they're not. That's okay, that's okay.
They had one next week on Wednesday.
We are living in, you're living
So it's like
more time than I love.
So I went to the board meeting Tuesday night. I went to the board meeting Tuesday night.
Yeah, it's evolving slowly.
Wednesday night.
That's what I've heard.
It's
It's evolving.
dark
but-
and cold.
I mean, that's,
I just,
we're living right now, so.
yeah, so I skipped it and I'm going to talk.
relax ligaments so that those.
No, it's Monday. It's Monday.
I mean, this Monday.
It's Monday, yeah,
I
right.
haven't studied it. I make it a point.
Roger.
As for
Rabbi
Torah
Klein.
classes,
I